Art understood? I don't care if you're an artist, an art collector, or a dealer, or even a truck driver, everyone likes art. If you've ever felt confused by art, I'm here to tell you I've been a successful artist for 40 years. I've done work for major corporate collections and celebrities. My work has been acquired by the Queen of England, presidents and prime ministers of different nations, and even the Vatican has an artwork of mine on permanent display. But when it comes to the full definition of art, I'm still as confused as you are. So let me bring you up to speed on those words you've heard and never understood. And then let's put all of that aside and talk about what is really important, which is understanding what is in your soul when you look at the art you love. This is Art Understood. And so here we are, another episode of Art Understood. And today what we're going to do is, just for fun, we're going to have a kind of a loosey-goosey one here and talk a little bit about the celebrities I had the privilege of working with over the years. So you know a few of the celebrities that I've dealt with. Which is the one you're most interested in hearing about?
Well, I got to sit there and say one guy that I really would like to hear something about would be David Suzuki.
Who's that?
Oh, who is that, man? Boy, there's a lot on that one, but yeah.
Well, actually, let me explain that just in case we have Americans too. So, David Suzuki is in Canada is our eco hero. He's like Jacques Cousteau was international. David is our national warrior, against the people that damage our environment and stuff like that. And David, he was in Windsor one time, and he was launching a new book, and there was the one after the Metamorphoses, the book that he did, and I happened to, I thought, I'll just drop a note on his table, because after a lot of times when these guys do it and they're launching a book, they'll have a speech and you sit there and it's very enjoyable, and then they go out in the hallway and sign books for people. So I actually bought a book, of course, and then I slipped the letter over to him and he put it aside. He's really nice, like he's a gracious person, and the letter was mentioning to him that I would definitely work with him to try and help his foundation financially for fundraising. And I was surprised that I hadn't heard from him. I really didn't even expect to, because when you're doing stuff like that, you're probably take 10 hits to get somebody even to be interested. About 6 or 9 months later, David, actually, I picked up the phone and it was David Suzuki on the phone.
So he actually gave you a call?
Oh, yeah, he gave me a phone call direct, which was. And anybody that knows David knows his voice. You can't miss that voice. It's just so special to me, in particular to hear. And so anyway, David said, I really have to apologize. He said, I realize this letter's been sitting here since I was in Windsor, and I didn't realize what it was all about. Again, I don't know, 6 or 9 months later. And he said, we'd love to have you work with us. So I had seen his book, Metamorphoses, and it had brought, I've got these ideas that pop in my head. I had this idea that David had transformed himself obviously from this little child into this, like to me, a superhero. To me, boy. Yeah, right. From a young boy. He actually, and I learned that he had lived here in this Canada Southland, Windsor area for 4 years, and they lived on the Fox Farm in Ruthven. And he used to go into Point Pelee, and he would, play with his science. He was really a bright young kid, but he was really, really into nature, and. So anyway, and the funny thing was, is his father used to get so upset because David would go out and he'd pick up roadkill off the road and pin it up to his wall in his bedroom. So I always got a chuckle with that, because his father would have to go through every month and actually clean up the roadkill off the walls. But I mean, that's how interested he was in everything. And David's favorite study was he studied as a geneticist. He studied fruit flies because their generations happen so fast, but he loved butterflies. That was his favorite study, and that's why in the picture you actually see butterflies. So I decided to use metamorphosis, and I got David to come back down here. We flew him down, and I took pictures of him, and we did all of the research that we needed for that, and actually photography that I needed. And I went over to Point Pelee, and I found a young guy that was out at the Pelee Marsh. Anybody from our area would think it's really cool because, when you take a look at the picture, it's actually where you rent the canoes there. If you pull into the parking lot, you go off to the left. There's a little bit of a pond area, and marsh, but it's kind of away from everybody. And I took this young kid. I just saw him out there. I thought, well, that looks like it would have been David when he was younger, and I had him pose for me.
Wow. Okay.
His mother was there, so I wasn't worried about anybody thinking I was too weird. But And then we had what I did is I transformed it into David being this young child in the painting as the prime subject, and holding up an old canning jar, and in the canning jar, there's actually there's a metamorphosis happening in what he holds up in the painting. So in the canning jar, he has a frog, and there's tadpoles that are floating around inside this thing, because he used to go over there, and he would literally, in that spot, he used to catch tadpoles. So, and then in the reflection in the water to show the damage of the world, you see today's, or back then it would be, going back a few years, but it was David Suzuki as a mature doctor of science, and he's holding up a science beaker, and in the science beaker, the water even is a little bit murky, but there's a frog and there's no tadpoles. So, and actually David would use that, like I would say, when you come back 40 years later and to visit your friends, you find things have changed. And I did a speech like that, and David actually stole that piece of speech from me. He confessed to it, but he says, yeah, it was a great piece. So anyway, so then we start raising funds for David, and his foundation was fairly new, so it was really, I get a tear in my eyes when I'd have a note. David would send me a note, and it would always be a handwritten note. He'd never send it's the same thing with Jane Goodall. They always send handwritten notes, nothing typed, and it's just so special, right? And I remember the one time he sent me a note. He says, every time we're running out of money, sure enough, we get a check from the work that we did together.
Foundation.
Yeah, it was really made me proud. And here I am, 40 years later, again. He was in town about 2 weeks ago, and he actually reminded me of that himself. He remembered that point, that he says, yeah, when we were just starting out, he said, you were always there for us. So I wanted to do more for him, and it led us to some other interesting
pieces of work,
projects. Yeah. And in the we're going to put the visual podcast up on. So I think I'd like to see Ryan do is to actually give you an image of each one of these as we're speaking, and that's on Spotify or Facebook, and you can get at it through our website. So that led into who now? Let's just see.
Okay, another person, I think.
Because
Gordon Lightfoot?
Yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah, Gordon was amazing. David, when you start to realize how important people are, is when David says, maybe Gordon Lightfoot will help. And he called me the next day and said, Gordon Lightfoot is going to help.
So he actually helped with...
Well, yeah, David did.
Okay.
Yeah, David was really helpful with me, because he knew, first off, the one thing that was very important for me, and I hope other artists, that when you're developing something along the line of what I do with celebrities, I don't ask for anything. I never ask for any, not even a penny from people. I'm there to help. If I can't help, if I can't afford to help, I don't try. I'm not going to go and beg. And that's why I found even with David, there was another artist in the area who actually kind of almost, I'll stay away from the name, but through me ended up sending something to David, but he was actually getting David to pay for something he was doing. And it came across as a bit of a scam, but anyway, so David would pass me along because he trusted me.
Okay, I was going to ask. Did that relationship, was it affected at all because of what this other person did?
No, because I apologized. I didn't realize it was happening, and it was a bronze that a sculptor that of David, and then he kind of convinced him to spend more money on different on copies of that sculpture, which that's way back there. And David, again, he says, that's got nothing to do with you, Ron. Like, it was nice for him to kind of forgive that it happened. So anyway, and he knew that I wasn't like that. He'd get a check. I never asked him for payment back or whatever. Then Gordon was so good with David. Like, Gordon, David had a party in BC, and Gordon flew his whole band out to perform the party, in a private jet, the whole deal, and never charged. He actually made money for him. And then Gordon, I wanted to do something special because in the art pieces, you're trying to work whatever is in the heart of people, right? I do. I mean, that's in this situation. You're trying to find that thing that really strikes home for people. And with Gordon, it was the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, the song. So it was pretty easy for me to figure that one out. A very, very simple painting of the Edmund Fitzgerald. But I didn't want the Edmund Fitzgerald to be in this disaster, because the only paintings I've ever seen about that were in a storm. One guy had the Edmund Fitzgerald in a storm and huge waves, and the portholes were all open. You don't open portholes when you're in a storm. Mm-hmm. And we did that, and we raised a lot of money for David at that point. Like that painting, we sold the prints out prior to me even finishing the painting. There was 722 prints went out the door or were pre-sold by the time we got to it. So again, it was making David very happy, making the foundation happy, and making me very proud of what we were doing with Suchiu Art.
So what was it like working with him?
With Gordon or David?
Well,
Gordon, I find I've worked with several celebrities, and the high-end celebrities either have time for you or they don't. And what the difference is either they like you or they don't. And if you're, again, I don't know maybe how David passed me along to people. They were always super with me. Mm-hmm. Like they were, Gordon was the day I met him, the moment I met him, I was his buddy. And that doesn't happen with Gordon Lightfoot very often.
That must have been a great feeling.
Oh, it was phenomenal because, we first saw him down here he came through on his tour, an album tour, and we were invited to go backstage and meet all of the band and stuff like that. And this is after I did the work with him. After we had to send all the prints to Toronto, and they were taken care of by his manager, Barry Harvey, a wonderful man. And then Gordon, like when we were down, he just came running across the hall. He said, "Ron Suchiu, I can't believe I get a chance to meet you." It's like we're in the party. Gordon actually is avoiding the after-concert party. He doesn't like them.
Okay.
And everybody thought, who the hell's the guy out in the hallway yelling Ron Suchiu? It was Gordon Lightfoot himself. And he ran in and gave me a great big hug. It was really neat. And then we got a chance to see him in L.A. and stuff like that. So, yeah, even in L.A., we were getting ready to leave after a show, and his car pulled up at the hotel we were in. He just came to the hotel and just say goodbye.
And just to say goodbye to you.
Yeah, it was really cool. That's it was really a lot of fun. Yeah. And actually, that's one of the things that I found with the art is I not a super wealthy man because of what I did. I've given a lot to a lot of people, and probably way too much because, I didn't understand that charity starts at home. That would never really worked for me that well. So, it's just like the experiences have been worth a lifetime of phenomenal experiences. Really, really amazing experiences. And then that led me down. So like what I found, and again with artists that are out there, or anybody that has the want to help the world, stop asking for stuff for yourself. That comes to you. If I put it in a real crude way, is every dollar you give, somehow you return $10, or you get $10 back in value of life, in quality of life or experiences. You can't go wrong. I mean, it's just, giving is getting to me.
Yeah, and what you do give, like you say, it does come back.
It always comes back. I've never, as long as you're doing it with grace. If you do it with the thought that, what I'll do is I'll give this guy such and such and I'll scam him later. Well, no.
No, it doesn't work that way.
No. That's not even a good trick. It never has been, never will be. And it's more and more obvious day by day that things are going that way. But then I get passed along because you take care of people, and I got passed along the next to Sting.
Okay.
And Sting was one of the honorary director for the David Suzuki Foundation at the time. Sting was very much into saving the rainforests in Africa. So he understood David, and when he was in Canada, he went to see one of David's talks. And they became pretty close friends, and he was really nice with me,
So was that how you met Sting? Was through the relationship?
Through David, yeah. And that's also how I got sued by Sony, or not Sony Records, but Polygram Records tried to sue me. I get these stories when it comes to art to me, and I'll maybe we'll get into the story sooner or later, but I even moved the President of the United States across the states from Washington to Hollywood on my invitation.
Oh, okay.
And when there was an active president. So, when you can do that, then damn well art is very powerful stuff.
Can I ask you what president that was?
It was Bill Clinton.
Okay.
Yeah, Bill Clinton. And that story's a little bit too long for here, but it's written in my book.
Okay.
It's written in the Wizard of Art book. So anyway, Sting, had a lot of fun with him because I wanted to show his face, and at the same time I didn't want it. I don't like portraiture. Like, I don't like just straight up portraits. Mm-hmm. If you want a portrait of you, then I'm going to figure out what you do, what you are, what your life was all about, and I'm actually going to try and place you there, and place you in your story, because it's not the person's face that becomes the life. It's the person's face inside of its story.
With the things.
Yeah, with the story. What happened?
I mean,
a face is usually not very interesting. It might be interesting for half an hour if you got the most beautiful face in the world, but sooner or later that wears out. Right. So I always found that, like, even with Sting's a very, very good-looking guy, and I thought, well, how do I portray Sting as not as the singer-songwriter, but as the person that's trying to help the world? So then I actually got into Checkmate.
Yeah.
We have Metamorphosis happening for David. We have the Edmund Fitzgerald happening for David. Now we have Checkmate, which people didn't understand Checkmate, but I had a collector of mine who commissioned me to do a painting out of Toronto, and his daughter worked at Ontario Place, and Sting had played there, and she had to play chess with him, because what I found out was Sting was very, very excellent chess player. So when when he was backstage for the day, because they're doing all the sound checks, the setup and everything, well, it's got to be the most boring job in the world. They're just hanging around backstage. And he would set up a chessboard, a little card table in the hallway, and he'd ask everybody walking by, you play chess? You any good?
Yeah.
And she walked by and she says, yeah, I play chess. Are you any good? She says, I'm pretty good. He says, sit down. And because of that, now you got this story happening because, her chatting with him, and I had a chance to meet her because of her father, but it was like now you start to find out what the real story is with his personality, not Sting that we know, Sting as a singer-songwriter, but Sting as the person.
As the person himself.
Yeah, and he actually played the world champion at one time. He lost, but he was that good of a player where he didn't mind challenging himself. And so I made him a chess player. And in the painting, you actually see him portrayed. He's got like a Batman cape. He's got Roy Roger gloves. He's got the stance of Superman. Like, I've actually built a whole bunch of superheroes into that one person just standing there, because these guys are, when you have the ability to do what you do, or to help the world, or you got the ability to just take your fortune and have fun with it, which, a lot of wealthy people don't care about anything but the money. Sting wasn't like that. He really did put a lot into it.
Did you run that by him, that you were thinking when you were going to do that?
No, I surprised him.
You surprised him?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm kind of lucky that I guessed well, because when he saw it, I always look for that special quote when Gordon Lightfoot, he says, your Evan Fitzgerald is my favorite because it's not in a storm. It was going under the Ambassador Bridge, a peaceful looking.
Okay.
It was peaceful.
Peaceful.
It was beautiful to see the ship. And with him, it was like, wow, chess. And the portrayal is the Victoria Falls is going dry in Africa, and I've got a chessboard that's covered up the river. Well, the chessboard covering the river are the games that people play to destroy the world. And that, if you look at the painting, you'll actually start to see the tiles, the black and white tiles or squares. It looks like a chessboard, black and white squares. And they're starting to fall back into the river because he's there to help save it. And then he's the king, the good king in the painting, and also he's a pawn. You'll see his face twice in the painting. That's been a really enjoyable painting. A sideline story about that is we had a show in Sandusky, Ohio, at the Radisson Center. We gave me a whole floor of the building, and we really had a gorgeous show there. And they advertised me for a month, and it was really all different people that I've never met those kind of people before to see my art.
Your art. Yeah.
It was all a brand new situation for me. And a lady, I was standing and talking to everybody I could. I just enjoyed that so much. A lady walked up and she says, "Oh, I know that piece of art." And it's like, my eyebrows go up. It's like, wow, here we are in a different country. And
different area,
the whole thing. And she said, "Yeah, I teach that piece of art in my class." She was an art teacher. And from Pennsylvania, I said, "What do you mean you teach it? Like that, I got to hear this story."
Yeah.
And she says, "Well, it's a beautiful piece of medieval art." I said, "Wait a second." I said, "Medieval art?" She says, "Yeah, it's like done by way back when, and there was such a good look to the future with it and stuff like." But when I realize it now, there's nothing in there that's modern. And there is, but it's hidden. And I said, "Well, you couldn't teach medieval art because it's mine." She says, "Well, no, I know you got it." But I said, "No, I painted it." And it took me about 5 minutes to convince this lady that
you actually
that's my signature on the front of the thing. Yeah. Oh yeah. It was. I thought that was the craziest thing. And then after a while, it's like you almost hear her gulp because it's like, okay, how many students has she taught the wrong painting to? Right?
Well, that's the way she took it, though.
Oh, it was fine with me. Yeah, fine with me. And then Polygram Records came along, and they wanted to sue me because I used Sting's face. And when I was sitting with Sting when he was signing the prints, I said, so they own every move you make, every breath you take, right?
Okay, yeah.
And he said, well, I didn't realize when I signed the contract, I signed my face away to him.
But he gave you authorization.
Yeah. So anyway, but they could have still sued me. There's no doubt about it. They could have sued me because, and he signed it, but he endorsed it. Mm-hmm. But the thing is he ended up that show, Good Morning America. This is going back a few years. I found out about a year later that Sting was on that show, and they brought up that piece of art. And what is weird, Time Magazine ran it as he painted it because they didn't really take a good look at the signature. If you look at the signature, it could say Sting, my signature. And so he was on Good Morning America. He was protecting me. And he said, I did that as a personal thing for a wonderful foundation. And Polygram came after the artist. And he said, I called the lawyers and said, you're going to have one very unhappy person to deal with if you keep on going at this guy. And they were calling me here with all of their legal terms and stuff like that. And the long jargon and stuff like that. So
basically Sting intervened.
Yeah, Sting actually protected me. Yeah, yeah. And I wish I would have known about that. Those would be neat things to have a copy of, but I didn't know about it until quite a while after because it was happening all in New York and it wasn't here. But interesting stuff. And then Polygram just backed away on it after a while. Yeah.
Well, I guess they wouldn't want to be involved especially
not for that.
Yeah.
Because that starts to look really crazy when you get a company like Polygram saying, "Well, we don't care about the environment. We don't care about that artist.
Yeah.
We just care about that face that makes us money." Yeah. So.
Well, that's it's a good thing that he actually then stood up for you.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have been very proud about that moment.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Just somebody to go out on the ledge like that and sit there and say, this is what is important.
Yeah.
So,
and again, I think we repeat, when you're trying to use your talent or whatever to raise funds for people, that's where a lot of people make the mistake of being greedy with it. And it's because there is no greed. You don't fight somebody that's being honorable and being honest, and you know what I mean. And that's what I found anyhow. And so
okay.
Then it took me down other roads.
Yeah, it definitely did. And allowed you to meet other people and stuff like that. Another thing. I watched the movie Everything.
I know where you're going.
Dan Aykroyd.
Well, that's a thrill because that's been a huge part of my life since that happened. We got story after story after story, and I keep on promoting my book at the same time because I put a lot of these stories in the Wizard of Art book. Not that I could cover them all, but Danny's been a lot of fun. I mean, because of Dan Aykroyd, we've stayed at his house. We've stayed at John Belushi's house, John being gone. But I've stayed at the Blues Brothers' houses.
Yeah, okay.
And I've sung with Elwood Blues. Not that I did any better than Dan. Dan's not the best in the world at it. But, Danny, we did Pure Blues with Danny. And that was basically a very simple painting of him and John on stage. I actually got the idea from the composition from that on. We were invited to the company Roots. We were invited to the 20th anniversary Michael Budman, who was one of the owners of Roots, was a really, well, probably one of Danny's best Canadian friends. And they invited us, and we were there. And that night was the night that I met Dan Aykroyd. I was there with David Suzuki and Colleen, my wife. And when Danny went on stage, he was by himself. John had been gone for probably 10 years at that point. And he went on stage with a new band that was just starting to show their face. It was called Big Sugar. Well, Big Sugar became pretty big after that, but nobody even knew it. They were a bar band at the time. And I watched Danny walk on stage, and the control. He's an amazing person like this. He has this incredible psychological control of things. It's just, you walk through a room and he's 6'3", and he just, everybody in the whole room turns to him, and for good reason. He's got character beyond belief. So anyway, Elwood Blues, he disappears, and then all of a sudden he was all dressed up in just casuals. All of a sudden Elwood Blues shows up on stage with Big Sugar, and where we were right up table right in front of the stage, or like to the left stage, and Danny's up there, and he talked to the guy at the band, I don't know the names, but and you could tell he was telling him what he needed to do, and when he was doing that music, total control. Just look over, he'd have a little nod to one of the players, and then go ahead, do your lead, and then I thought, the only thing that's missing here is Jake.
Yeah.
But Jake, in my mind, I just put Jake on the other side of the stage where I couldn't see him, because there was a small stage, and it was a beautiful, clear blue night. It was at a lakeshore dance hall down in Toronto, and the stars were gorgeous that night, and everything was just that perfect night. It was almost like out of a movie. Yeah, it just felt like this movie, and I thought, you know what? I could just see all of the blue, and in the. I actually got the sky from the movie. You were talking about the movie. I don't know if you remember where they're sneaking around that RV in the parking lot.
Yeah.
It's da 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 da.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they're doing there, but it was a funny little piece, and I remember the sky was just the same thing, and that sky that we saw that night was the identical sky. It was just gorgeous. So I thought, well, pure blues, nothing better than for the Blues Brothers than pure blues.
Pure, yeah.
And so I actually started to work with my blue that I use. I use a unique blue in my paintings that most artists don't even know about, and I'm not going to tell them because it's a Suchiu secret. And I just thought, well, that's the purest blue. That's why I use it, because it's the purest blue I know of. And I thought, I'm just going to do the whole painting and really keep it blue, really nice blue. And then John being gone in the painting, the stage is their life. The stage goes on forever. It's a never-ending stage, and that's the way Danny is in life. He's like that. He's just, this whole world is just here as a stage, and no matter whatever I can get away with, I will, and I'll have fun doing it.
Fun-loving character.
Yeah, fun-loving character. Yeah, and extremely business-like. I mean, Danny, if you saw the movie Tommy Boy, anybody says, well, what's Danny like? Just watch the movie Tommy Boy. He's really straight to the fact, and he'd walk into a crowd, everybody's going to know him, but he'll walk around and say, Dan Aykroyd, how you doing?
Straight to
Dan
the point
Aykroyd.
and shake your hand.
Cool. Yeah. And so anyway, so I get that done, and I after that, it was like, being invited to LA to be with David Suzuki one night. We were going to be on stage with him for a special and release the Blues Brothers piece there. And we did it up in the foundation room. We thought we had 38 celebrities in the room that day.
Wow.
Yeah. For the
can you name a few?
Oh, yeah. Michael Keaton, Jeff Healy's band, the whole group was there. Oh, God, there was a vice president of of one of the big movie companies, and Martin Short, David Foster, it goes on, Sam Moore, the Doobie Brothers, all the Doobie Brothers band,
Really?
Oh, yeah. There was
so
Michelle
you had
Wright.
a real wide assortment of,
that night there was, actually Dan was saying that was the most celebrities ever had to show up at a party. And that was the night that Martin Short fell in love with my wife. Because he couldn't figure out who she was. Anyway, that was a lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah, so, and that's Pure Blues. The Pure Blues, Danny signed them all. We were raising funds for the David Suzuki Foundation.
Okay.
Yeah, which really worked out well.
So is there any other people that you would like to
so all of this happening, and we've gone through a series, and it did go on a little bit more. There are other things that I did for David, but David at that point introduced me to Jane Goodall, who
that must have been
literally changed. Yeah, and these things they're life altering. With Danny, it was life altering. The stories that I put in the book are so much fun. I mean, of him being our chauffeur for the night as Elwood Blues. Like having Elwood Blues drive you around and
just
in character,
in character as well.
Wow. And then, so then what happened was I get introduced to Jane Goodall through David, and Jane, the first time I ever met her was when I had done the painting. We discussed things back and forth. And a lot of times the way it's happening is, this is what I'm going to be doing. Are you okay with that? Yes, we are. And Jane was really good. She invited us to the Chelsea Inn up in Toronto to have lunch. We discussed the whole business of how I was going to work with David. But I also at that point said that once we're doing this, I'd like to go forward and help you. Mm-hmm. Because my talent can spread further than just David Suzuki. Yeah. And Jane being a humanitarian beyond, she's Mother Teresa to me. There's only one of those things, those Jane Goodalls that are going to come along every 100
person. Yeah.
If ever again, I don't even know if there ever will be another Jane Goodall. So we had that conversation, and when we were done, Jane walked up and gave me a big hug. And I lost my mother when I was 21, and I still break up inside when I feel this. She was my mother hugging me, which was like I couldn't comprehend that. Like I had a hug from my mother for the first time in years, and that stayed with me forever with her, forever. That one hug,
that feeling. Deep inside.
No, it was my mother. Yeah. Believe me, somehow that was being passed along to me, and I'm not even, I just don't believe in that kind of stuff. But I've had several things like that happen in my life where there's got to be a little magic there somewhere. There's got to be something that we can't comprehend, because that was not Jane hugging me. That was my mother hugging me. So anyway, we went on and we got the project done. With Jane, it was really an amazing thing to do, and what made me very proud was that Jane, at the time when we unveiled it months later, I think it was 18 months later, we had the piece done and everything was ready to go, and we took the prints up to Toronto for her to sign them with me, and when she saw the painting, the finished painting, she actually teared up and she started to cry. And it was a big thing for me. That when you do something like that, if the art is not meant, and we've said this before, the art is not meant for visual, just visual. It just can't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. And that little piece of magic that hit with her was, out of 37 portraits, she never liked one, but she loved this one.
She loved that.
She absolutely loved it and cherished it. We sent her 2 or 3 of them, and all of her offices had it and stuff. And so ended up to be really a big thing. And so they took us out for dinner after we had a speech, or Jane did a speech in front of about 5,000 people there in Ryerson, and it was really an amazing time. And the president and all of the department heads of Ryerson came out to have dinner with Jane, and they invited us along. It was really nice. It was at a really formal restaurant, but what was really cool about it was downstairs they had a private table, a very large private table in their wine rack. What do they call this thing? Anyway, I mean, where they keep all their wines anyhow. So, and they would serve us down there, just almost like a family meal. And at the dinner, it was really nice. Jane took out she has a cloth bag. She had a cloth bag that she would carry around. And I asked her what was in the bag. I guess a lot of people don't ask what's in the bag. And she said, well, those are very important mementos of my life. And she started pulling them out, what was really neat. And one was a feather from Chief George, who was in, you might remember the commercial of the pollution, and the chief was standing up on the hill.
On the hill and got the tear.
That was him, and he had given her this eagle feather, because eagle feathers have got to be given by a native person. You can't just own one. And anyways, and then she took out about 5 pieces of limestone rock, and just like crushed stone out of a road, and handed it to everybody.
Just to make sure I understand, this is a pouch that she actually had.
Yeah, it's like a
her.
Carpet bag type of thing. It's just like almost like one of these cloth bags.
And she started bringing
and she carries them all the time.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah. No, that's okay. No, it's great. Well, and nobody knew that, because she's always got this bag, but until you ask, you don't know. And I said, well, limestone, like crushed stone. And she said, Nelson Mandela handed that to me through the bars. And I was like, really? Oh my God. And then she had 29 cents, and she handed it, like everybody got a chance to take these and put them in their hands. And I mean, those incredible things. This is a lady is basing her whole life on these little objects. And the 29 cents was one of the top chicken growers in Africa to feed the poor. Was a lady that borrowed 29 cents borrowed from a guy to buy a chicken, and turned it into one of the biggest chicken farms
Unbelievable.
on the whole continent. It went on and on like that. So anyway, I was like, really kind of beautiful stories to hear, and Jane kept on looking over at me, and I don't know what I was showing, but there's those times we feel just like all of a sudden, maybe because I'm an artist, maybe I don't know if other people do this, I feel alone, totally alone in the world. And for some reason, right at that moment, it really made me feel alone. And I don't know why. And she says, Ron, what's up? Like, she looked over at me and she had that empathy. It was just incredible. She said, what's wrong? What's happening here? And I said, well, you know what? I got this feeling, and and it's like, where do you find all your hope? And that's what I really needed to know. Right. Like, where did this hope come from? And it's weird, because David Suzuki had told me this years before this. She said, my hope comes from the young animal like Flint that you did, the hope of that young creature having a life, a wonderful life. And she said, and the smiles on children. She worked with Roots and Shoots, was one of her biggest campaigns. It was an international educational campaign. And she said, the smiles on children always give me hope. And David Suzuki had told me that, he said, you can send a child to bed and you could have had an argument and they'll go to bed crying and whatever. And he says, they'll always wake up in the morning with a great big smile on their face. And that should have done it for me, right? So anyway, 10 minutes later, Jane looks over at me, and it didn't fulfill me for some reason. And she says, Ron, there's something here. Like, she just caught that there was something. I said, look, I lost my mother when I was 21. I said, I would love to have, and her speech was all about this mother, the thing with motherly love and everything, and in animals, in the chimps. And I said, I lost my mother when I was 21, and I said, I've always felt that need to have someone there that needed me, not me needing them. And she looked at, and I said, could I adopt you as my mother? And she looked at me like, no, you just went weird. I think you just crossed the line. And I said, no, there's nothing funny. I said, look let's just say the story. You're in England. Everybody's forgotten about you for some weird reason. You're 90 years old. I'm a bit younger. You don't have any groceries in the house. I want you to call me and I'll bring you groceries. Yeah. And I almost get a tear in my eye just doing that. But that, she says, oh, no, that's good. That's a good thing.
She understood what you're meaning by it.
And I said, I'm not your son. I want you to be my mother.
Yeah.
My mother figure. Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So she let me adopt her. And so these stories will go on and on and on. And what we should do probably is go to a first and second part. Hopefully we don't hit a third. But
because there are a lot of names that
there's a lot of names to it. Yeah, there is. And again, the art has taken me down paths where it just couldn't have happened without art. But anyway, let's just call this one part one of part two. And next time we'll get into something really, really special, as I'm the only artist that I know of in this world that George Lucas partnered with in a project. He didn't hire me to do a project. He partnered with me. That'll be the start of the next one. How about that? Does that work?
Sounds like Lucas will be the next one.
Yeah. That'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so until next time, we'll see you. And this is Art Understood.
Take care, everybody.
Easy, Skippy.